All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin. All right, let's begin by thanking our sponsors. I thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tammuz, Adam, Yudit Benzev, for dedicating all of the Shu'urim and Drushos this month in honor of their children, Jake, Sarina, and Rosie. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Rabbi Larry and Florence Ziffer, in memory of Rabbi Ziffer's father, Pinchas ben Yosef Elimelech, Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. And also with that, let us begin. So we have a lot to do today. Today's daf is Daf Ayin. For those of us who learned the daf together yesterday in the show, we left off a little bit on Samech Tes Amud Beis, and we left off actually in the middle of the sugya of Ezra, together with a group of Klal Yisrael, trying to daven for the removal of the Yetzer Hara for Arayos. So we left off a little bit. I think we left off about 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. 14, 16, 18. Okay, a lot of lines from the bottom, about 20 lines up from the bottom. So let's remember again that Ezra and his chevra felt so confident because Baruch Hashem, they were able to go ahead and lobby for the removal of the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah. So they figured, you know what, once we've been able to remove the Yetzer Hara for Avodah Zarah, let's remove the Yetzer Hara for Arayos as well, for immorality. They begin to go ahead and rein in that Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara itself tells them, if you do this, understand you'll destroy the world. Because as we discussed yesterday, and actually we saw this in Tzidkas HaTzadik a couple of weeks ago, remember again, Chet is a manifestation or a misdirection of energy. Energy by itself is not good, it's not bad, it just is. The shaila in life is how you choose ultimately to use it. So the Yetzer Hara for Arayos ultimately again comes from an energy, a koach of passion. A person could choose to misdirect it in all the wrong ways, but lamaisa, if channeled directly, it also allows for procreation, it also allows for the continuity of mankind, it also allows for the world to continue to exist. So the Yetzer Hara warns Ezra and this chevra, if you get rid of me, you're not only going to remove the immorality aspect, but you're going to remove even the most basic desire for procreation. And in fact, the Gemara says what occurred. They looked throughout all of Eretz Yisrael and they could not find a chicken which was laying an egg. So therefore, again, they're in this difficulty. So the Gemara says, Amri, Hechi Navid, what should we do? So the Gemara says, Hechi Navid, Naktale Kalya Alma. If we go ahead and eradicate this Yetzer Hara in totality, the world will cease to exist. This is very interesting. So then the next option is, well, let's ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu just to remove part of this Yetzer Hara. Part of this Yetzer Hara. So Palga Berekia Lo Yahavir. This is very interesting. The Ribono Shel Olam apparently does not grant partial requests in this area. It's really quite fascinating. In other words, either Yetzer Hara exists or it doesn't exist. So, for example, by Avodah Zarah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I'll remove it, right? That's where the piska, the piece of paper that said MS on it, came down from Shamayim. I'll remove it. But Lamai said there's no such thing as a partial removing of a Yetzer Hara like this. So what do? Kachlinu le'einei. So they literally means they blinded the eye of the Yetzer Hara. For Arayos, Vishavkua. And then they let it go. So what does it mean about saying? Va'ahani telo migri ba leinish bekrivasa. So we'll say what they did essentially is they blunted the impact of that Yetzer Hara. So to fully remove it, they couldn't do. To remove it even partially, they couldn't do. But somehow they were able to blunt the effect of that Yetzer Hara. How does that manifest itself? A person doesn't have a desire for incest, which is an interesting idea. So a person might desire all different types of arayos, but interestingly enough, normal people don't have a desire. Normal people don't have to combat a desire for incest. So Ezra and this chevra was able to remove the desire for arayos to some small degree, at least some area of illicit unions, they were able to go ahead and take off the table. Incredible. The Ma'arava Masnuachi. So we'll say in Eretz Yisrael, they had a different version. Remember again, this is all about Ezra's gathering people, and he's going. The lashon of the pasuk was that he went ahead and he said the lashon was Vayivarech Ezra as Hashem Elokim Hagadol. So we're trying to figure out what the Gadol was. In Eretz Yisrael, they had a different version of this. Eretz Yisrael, Rav Gidl Amar, Gadol shegidlo b'shem ha'mefurash. Gadol means that Ezra blessed HaKadosh Baruch Hu using the ineffable name. Now the Chiddush over there is that normally, as we said before, you're only allowed to use the Shem HaMefurash where? Where? Inside of the Beis HaMikdash. The Chiddush was that Ezra used the ineffable name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Rav Masna Amar, no. Hakel, Hagodol, Hagibar, V'Hanora. That Ezra blessed HaKadosh Baruch Hu using the formulation of God, who is Gadol, Gibar, and Nora. Gadol, great. Gibar, strong. Nora, awesome. So it says the Gemara Rav Masna Matye, the Rav Yoshua ben Levi, and the statement of Rav Masna supports Rav Yoshua ben Levi. Rav Yoshua ben Levi, Lama Nikran Shmon Anshi Knesses Hagedola. It will say why was this group of Rabbanim? It's not just Rabbanim. Why are these group of tzaddikim known as the Anshe Knesses Hagedola, the men of the great assembly? Shechziru Atar Liyoshna. This is beautiful because they reestablished the crown, the glory of the crown as it once was. In other words, apparently there was the crown of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the crown Kiviyachol was diminished, and this group restored the crown to its former glory. What happened? Asa Moshe, Amar Hakel Hagodol Hagibar V'Hanora. Moshe Rabbeinu, when referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Devarim, ultimately calls Hashem Hakel Hagodol Hagibar V'Hanora. Okay, so that formulation comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. Asi Yirmiyah Navi came along. Va'amar Nachrim Mekarkarin Behechalo Aye Nora Osaf. So Yirmiyahu says, how can you call HaKadosh Baruch Hu Nora when literally again the Nachrim, the Gentile nations, have overrun the Beis HaMikdash? Mekarkarin literally means croaking, right? In other words, they're celebrating. They're celebrating in a destroyed Beis HaMikdash. So where is the Nora Osaf? Where is the awesomeness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Lo Amar Nora. Yirmiyahu stopped saying Nora. He took off Nora. Asa Daniel. Amar Nachrim Mishtabdim Bibanav. Aye Gvurosaf. Daniel comes along and says, I don't understand. The Gentile nations are enslaving the Jewish people. Where is the Gevura? Where is the strength of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Lo Amar Gibar. So we'll say, see something amazing, right? So Yirmiyahu comes along and takes away Nora. Daniel comes along and takes away Gevura. Asa Inhu. The Anshe Knesses Hagedola come along. Va'amar Adraba. Zohi Gvuras Gvuraso. Shekovesh es Yitzro. Shenosin Erach Apayim L'Risham. So let's listen to this. Anshe Knesses Hagedola came along. And they said differently. They said no. That this in and of itself is the Gevura of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But we'll say, where does the strength of the Ribbon Shalom manifest itself? In his ability to abstain from punishing the Gentile nations. Shenosin Erech Apayim L'Rishayim. He exhibits patience towards the wicked. V'Elohei Nora Osav, and here is the awesomeness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shel Malei Mora'o Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. For were it not for the fear that the nations have of God, Heich Uma Achos Yechola Lizkayim. How could it be that one nation, the Jewish people, is able to go ahead and exist bein ha'umos, between all of the nations? So I just want to point out something absolutely amazing. See, the Anshe Knesses Hagedola understood, and really, if you think about this is incredible. You see, what happens over here is Yirmiyahu comes along, and Daniel comes along, and he removes Gvurosav, he removes Gvura's strength, because he sees the fact that the Nachrim have overrun the Beis HaMikdash as a sign of quote-unquote divine weakness. Divine weakness. Anshe Knesses Hagedola come along and they reinstitute Gvura. Because Anshe Knesses Hagedola say, do you know what? See, we'll say often we think that the greatest demonstration of strength is how you flex your muscles. But what Anshe Knesses Hagedola were saying is that sometimes the greatest display of strength is the ability to abstain from reacting. This is Ezu Gibor Hakovish Es Yitzro. See, strength is not manifest in your ability to pummel someone else. Strength is truly manifest in your ability to go ahead and exhibit self-control, restraint, and self-mastery. Therein lies the greatest. We know this in life. Our strongest moments are not when we vanquish someone else. You know what our strongest moments are? When someone says something and what? I don't respond. Or someone does something and I don't react. Those are actually the greatest moments of strength. So Anshe Knesset Gedolah come along and say, Yirmiyahu, Daniel, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're looking at all of these things as signs of divine weakness. But the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could exhibit restraint in the face of those who are ultimately trampling over his kavod, therein lies the greatest form of divine strength. And I will say, our mandate is v'halachta b'drachav, to emulate the Ribono Shel Olam. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu's strength is most manifest in his divine self-control, even when he is hurt, and even when he is maligned, and even when he is mistreated, he kiviyachol holds his divine tongue. He does not react. Then I will say how much we have to bring that to life as well. Because again, circumstances occur each and every day. People say stuff, people do stuff, people treat us in certain ways. And yes, of course, sometimes you do have to react. There's no question. Person also can't be a doormat. Sometimes you do have to say something back. Sometimes you do have to react. But there are so many other times in life where the best course of action is just silence. The best course of action is just to ignore and to move on. The best course of action is self-restraint. And who do we learn that from? None other than Avinu Shebashamayim. So therefore, again, ultimately, again, Anshe Knesset HaGedolah comes back, and they go ahead and they reinstate Hakel, Hagodol, Hagibar, V'Hanora. So the Gemara says as follows, V'Rabana. And they also say, by the way, Nora, it's interesting. We translate Nora as awesome. They're also understanding that Nora is from Lashon of Yira. That ultimately, again, they said, how do you explain the existence and survival of the Jewish people amongst a sea of hostile nations? It can only be explained because at the end of the day, there is a fear, ultimately, again, that the nations of the world have of Am Yisrael. It's not a conscious fear. It's almost a subconscious fear. And where does that fear come from? It must come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Anshe Knesset HaGedolah reinstated all of the praise that Daniel and Yirmiyahu had peeled off. But Abanon, Hechi Avdiachi, Va'akri Takanta, the Takin Moshe. So now I think we're going to ask a more basic shaila. If Moshe Rabbeinu instituted the verbiage of Hakel, Hagodol, Hagibar, V'Hanora, how do Yirmiyahu and Daniel begin to peel away some of these things? After all, again, if Moshe instituted it, what right do they have to go ahead and change it around? To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar, this is beautiful. Mitoch sheyodin ba'HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'amitihu lefichach lo kizbu bo. See, Rabbi says, it goes back to yesterday's daf, that the essence of the Ribono Shel Olam is emes, is truth. So Yirmiyahu and Daniel felt that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would not want us to praise him in ways that don't look genuine. So to call God Gibor when he's being trampled upon, to call God Nora when it looks like he and his nations are being overrun, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would not want us to say things which were untrue or which appeared to be untrue. Now, Anshe Knesset HaGedolah come along and they reframe it. It's still true. It's still true. You just have to understand those attributes in a different way. Which I will say, if you think about this, it's such an incredible yisod. See, the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is emes, which is why, by the way, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not expect perfection from us. This is an incredible yisod. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not expect us to be perfect. What does he expect of us? This is incredible. What does he expect of us? To be genuine. That's all. I could make mistakes, which I do each and every day. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, just be a genuine person. Don't be fake. Don't be fake. That's one that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't deal with. That's why, what's the entire essence of tshuva? The entire essence of tshuva is just to be genuine. Chatasi, avisi, pashati, asisi kach v'kach. I did it, right? That's what Rambam says, Hilchos Tshuva. Asisi kach v'kach, vari boshti, unichamti b'masai, uli olam eini chozula davar zeh. Just be genuine. Because all HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants of us is emes. That's all. Not perfection, not even greatness. Not even greatness. Just genuinity. It's a new word, just invented in the English language right now, right? Just genuinity, just ultimately, again, to be a genuine person, because that is the midah of the Ribono Shel Olam. Quite incredible. The Gemara goes weiter. The Kari Achemos Rachvas, so we'll say now we go weiter. So the Gemara says, and the Kohen Gadol does these kriyos, all the kriyas Torah, ultimately again from Achremos and Achba Aser Parsha Semar, or Minu, or Minhi, Medal Giminav and Medal Gibet Torah. So we'll say, but one second, The Gemara over here quotes the Gemara Maseches Megillah that you're allowed to skip around in the scroll of Nevi'im, but you're not allowed to skip around in Torah. So how are they skipping around over here on Yom Kippur? Lo kashya, kam b'chtei yafsik hatorgaman, kam b'chtei shelo yafsik hatorgaman. So we'll say the halach is you could skip around as long as what? As long as you get to the second spot before the Turgaman finishes his explanation. So let's remember again, earlier on, he used to have a Turgaman. So the job of the Turgaman was the Baal Kori would go ahead and read the Pasuk or read Psukim, and the Turgaman would then go ahead and explain it so that it was understandable by the general masses. So the Gemara seems to indicate over here that Allah Chalamayse, you could jump around, you could skip around, but you can't essentially have a pause. You can't have a lapse. So therefore, again, you could skip, but you have to get to the second spot before the Turgaman finishes his translation. I've hala katani medalgim b'navi medalgim b'torah. But Rabbi say the same Braisa says you could skip in Navi, you can't skip in Torah. Vant kama medaleg, and how much can you skip in Navi? B'chtei shel yafsik haTurgaman. So Rabbi say it sounds like that's a din in Navi. Habatorah klal lo. Sounds like you're not allowed to skip around in Torah at all. But in Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol is clearly skipping from Vayikra to Bamidbar. So the Gemara says, Amra Abaye lo kasha kan b'inyan echad kan b'shnei inyanin. It's not a problem. You're allowed to skip in Torah as long as what? As long as what? You are going ultimately, you're staying in the same topic. You're staying in the same topic. So therefore, again, the Kohen Gadol could skip around on Yom Kippur because, again, he's going from one Yom Kippur Kriya to a second Yom Kippur Kriya, right? Ultimately, again, the part that details the Avodah to the part that details the Karbanos. In Navi, interestingly enough, you could skip as much as you want, even in different topics, as long as what? You get to your second destination in Navi before the Turgaman finishes his translation. Tanya, we learned, and I will say it supports this idea. You could skip around in Torah as long as you're staying on topic. And Navi, you could skip even in different topics. V'kan, b'chtei shelo yafsik haTurgaman. So we'll say the halacha when it comes always to skipping is that essentially there can't be tircha de tzibura. You can't go ahead and create a sense of, what's the word? Tircha de tzibura. A what? A schlep, right? That's the technical term, right? You can't go ahead and schlep out davening, right? You can't go ahead and create an inconvenience for the tzibur by essentially creating an unnecessary pause. What the Gemara is suggesting over here is as follows. You could skip in Torah, you could skip in Navi. The limitation is in Torah, you can only skip if you're staying on topic. In Navi, you could skip even from topic to topic, but both in Torah and Navi, you only have the ability to skip if you can get to the second location before what? Before the Turgaman finishes his translation, so that there is no unnecessary pause. So the Gemara says, however, you cannot skip from one Navi to another Navi. So in other words, you can't go from Shoftim to Shmuel Aleph. That you can't do. However, the exception to this is Trei Asar. Trei Asar, both in the eyes of Chazal, is considered to be one book of Nevi'im. So you can go from one Navi to another Navi in Trei Asar. Ayin Amud Aleph. Let's say, yeah, okay, good. With one exception, you can't go from the beginning of Trei Asar, ultimately, I should say differently, I'm sorry. You can't go from the end of Trei Asar to the beginning of Trei Asar. So interestingly enough, you can skip in Trei Asar even from the beginning to the end, but you can't go from the end to the beginning. Good. The Golel Sefer Torah. So we'll say, then Kohen Gadol rolls up the Sefer Torah and he says, more, right? Yoser, more than what I have read to you is written in this scroll. V'kol kach lama, kadesh hotzilaz al Sefer Torah. Because just remember again, there are going to be certain sections that the Kohen Gadol is reading Baal Peh. So you were concerned, we don't want it to be that Chas v'Shalom people think that the reason the Kohen Gadol is reading this Baal Peh is why? Because it's not written in the scroll. So therefore he rolls it up, he holds it and he says, by the way, everything I'm telling you is written in this scroll. Some of it I read inside, some of it we're doing outside. So we'll say again, the section in Chumash Bamidbar, he goes and he reads Baal Peh, Amai, Niglo v'nikri. I don't understand. Why do you have to read it Baal Peh? You're already in Chumash Vayikra. Just go ahead and roll it to Bamidbar and read this additional section of Asar LaChodesh from the Torah. Rav Huna Rav Yoshua, Amarav Sheshes Lefi Shein Golovin Sefer Torah B'Tzibor Mipnei Kavod Tzibor. Both say this is very interesting. We don't roll the Torah B'Tzibor out of Kavod Tzibor. Those both say there is a din Kavod Tzibor. It's all the same idea. The Kavod Tzibor means creating an unnecessary delay. So out Kavod Tzibor, we do not roll Sifrei Torah. We do not roll Sifrei Torah during davening. So, which again, the Gabbaim are usually very makbid on this. Right? That again, you roll the Sefer before davening. You don't roll the Sefer during davening itself. Out Kavod Tzibor. So the problem is, if the Kohen Gadol is going to go from Vayikra to Bamidbar, that's going to necessitate ultimately rolling the Sefer Torah B'Tzibor. We don't do that, and therefore again, he reads what he reads from Vayikra, rolls it up, holds it, says there's more than what I read to you is written in here, and reads a section in Bamidbar Bal Peh. So I don't know, why don't you just bring a second Sefer Torah? Take out two Sefer Torah. From the first Sefer, read in Chumash Vayikra. From the second one, read in Sefer Bamidbar. Shalom Yisrael. So the Gemara says, Rav Huna Bar Yehuda Amar Mishum Pigamal Shal Rishon. Both say this is very interesting, because what's going to happen? People are going to think that the first Sefer is deficient, and therefore you're bringing out the second Sefer. See, both saying, this is such an incredible yisod. People form opinions all the time without what? Without sufficient information. So we'll say, isn't this incredible? In other words, that when someone sees, so what's happening over here is as follows. We have a number of competing halachic principles. Ideally, we'd like to read from a Sefer Torah. The problem is we don't roll a Sefer in the Tzibur. So the Gemara says, so just take out a second Sefer and read from the second Sefer of Midbar. Someone's going to see that, and someone might not know the halacha that you don't roll a Sefer b'tzibur. So they're going to therefore assume that what? Why are you taking out the second Sefer? Why are you taking it out? Because the first Sefer must be deficient. So I'll say it's an incredible yisod in human nature. We assume, and we all do this at different times, but we assume that we know everything. And so whatever opinion I am forming is based on all of the facts. And often that leads to erroneous conclusions. But again, you can't fight human nature. So the Gemara says we can't take out a second Sefer because Lamaisa, again, people will think the first is deficient. But Reish Lakish Amar Mishum Bracha Sheina Tzricha. Reish Lakish says there's a different issue. The different issue is ultimately again a Bracha Sheina Tzricha. Well, so if you take out a second Sefer, you're going to have to make a second set of brachos. So ultimately, again, Siyabosai, in reality, you should be able to use the first Sefer. We just don't want you rolling the first Sefer to Bamidbar. Why? Tircha de Tzibura. So what's the answer? Take out a second Sefer, but that's then going to require another bracha. But you don't really require another Sefer, and therefore that's a bracha she'en tzricha, unnecessary bracha. I'm sorry. Umichai shina lepegama. So the Gemara says, 1 second. In general, this is very interesting. So you're going to tell me we don't take out a second Sefer because people are going to think you took out the second Sefer because the first one doesn't have the section from Bamidbar. But is that true? We'll say, here we go. Rosh Chodesh Teves Shechal Yos B'Shabbos. When Rosh Chodesh Teves falls out on Shabbos. Now, both say Rosh Chodesh Teves always falls out when? During Chanukah. So when Rosh Chodesh Teves falls out on Shabbos, both I have a number of kriyos. I have Shabbos, I have Chanukah, I have Rosh Chodesh. So what's the halacha? Mevi'in shalosh toros. You take out 3 Sefer Torah. The Korn Achas Binyan Shayom. One of them you go out and you read in Chanukah. Parshas Shavua. Va'acha shal Rosh Chodesh. One for Rosh Chodesh. Va'acha shal Chanukah. So ultimately, we'll say, so what do you see from here? You take out 3 Sefer Torah. So you see over here clearly, we're okay with taking out multiple Sifrei Torah. And both say, we're not concerned that someone's going to say, oh, they took out the first Sefer because it has Parshas Shavua. I bet it clearly doesn't have Rosh Chodesh. So we take out a second one. It clearly doesn't have Chanukah. So we're not concerned about that. So why don't we take out 2 Sifrei Torah by Yom Kippur also, make it easy. To which the Gemara says, here's the difference. Tlasa Gavri Bitlasa Svari, Bitlasa Sifri, Leka Pegama. Chad Gavra Betray Sifri Ika Pegama. Both say, to which the Gemara says, here's the difference. Everyone agrees that when you have 3 different individuals getting 3 different aliyos in 3 different svarim, that's not a problem. What's the issue by Yom Kippur? What's the issue by Yom Kippur? We're saying the only person, quote unquote, getting the aliyah is who? Is the Kohen Gadol. That's it. Rabbi, remember again, it's actually very interesting because remember, Rabbi, let's go back for just a moment. Is the kriya part of the avoda? Is the kriya part of the avoda? right? It's like, really the answer is no. Really the answer is no. It's kind of a little bit attached to the avoda, because it's what the Gemara called tzorech avoda, right? Because remember again, the Kriya details what's done in the avoda. So it's a tzorech avoda, but it's not real avoda. But because it's tzorech avoda, only the Kohen Gadol gets the aliyah, right? Ultimately, again, no one else. So we'll see, here's what's interesting, the Gemara says. To take out multiple svarim, when you have multiple olim, that's fine. That's fine. No one is going to go ahead and be choshesh that there's some deficiency in the sefer, because it's clearly 3 different aliyos. That works. The problem we have by Yom Kippur is that it's one olah. It's all the Kohen Gadol. So we're concerned that if you start taking out different svarim for quote-unquote the same olah, that's where people could come to the erroneous conclusion that perhaps the sefer itself is deficient. Therefore, the way we remedy Rabbi say it essentially is as follows. The 2 kriyos in Chumash Vayikra, right, in Achrei Mos Emor, that will do from the same sefer. Because that you could roll from one inyan to another inyan in the same sefer, and you do it just quickly enough that what? The Turgaman has not finished his explanations. But for the reading in Chumash Bamidbar, that's we're going to roll up the sefer. The Kohen Gadol is going to hold it. He's going to make the not declaration. What's the word? Exception. Okay, he's going to make the statement that, by the way, the sefer is not deficient. The sefer is not deficient. The sefer, what is it? Approbation. Okay, good. What? Proclamation. And I'm looking for the word that means like the proviso, right? He's gonna shkoyach. Get that man an extra cup of coffee or something, right? Whatever. What are we handing out back there? Sheet cake, whatever it is. Get him an extra piece, an M piece with extra frosting. Right? So again, the Maisa again, I will say. So again, he makes the proviso that says, by the way, everything is written in the sefer. You shouldn't think the sefer is deficient. Ultimately, again, just als torech tircha de tzibura. I'm going to read this Baal Peh. Incredible. Says the Gemara. Mavarich alesh shmona brachas. So remember again, the Mishnah then went on and said, we make 8 brachas on this kriya. What are the 8 brachas here? We went through them in the Mishnah, but the Gemara goes through them again. Tan Rabbanan, ala Torah, keder shemavarchem beis haknesa. So we make the bracha of Asher Bachar Banu and Asher Nasan Lanu. Now we kind of count that as one bracha, but the Maisa make the bracha before the kriya, after the kriya, just like we do by regular kriyas Torah. Ala avoda, va'ala avoda, va'ala haoda. Al avoda will say avoda is ritzei. Rashi points out over here, right? Avoda is ritzei, and ultimately again hoda'ah is modim. Va'al mechila sa'avon. We'll say this is the bracha of mechal la'avon osina b'yom kippurim hazeh. The bracha that we say today in Shemona Esrei, they said that ultimately the Kohen Gadol would say it as part of the kriya. Ala mechila sa'avon kitikna, ala mikdash b'fnei atzmo. Then they made a bracha for the continuity of the Beis HaMikdash. Ve'al kohanim b'fnei atzman, a bracha for the kohanim. Ve'al Yisrael b'fnei atzman, and for Klal Yisrael. Ve'al shar tefillah, and then ultimately again, we'll say the rest of quote unquote the rest of davening. So we'll say it's very interesting. It appears that Bismana Mikdash, much of what we do in Shemona Esrei, the Kohen Gadol did as the brachos around Kriyas HaTorah, which is really just quite fascinating. So first of all, say it should be an incredible chizik for us, because a lot of times we come to Yom Kippur, and again, as we see as we go through this Masechta, so much of the essence of the Yom Kippur experience was the avoda of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, and kind of it could be a little bit demoralizing because we see we don't have this, but yet we do have it. We just have it in different forms. Right? So many of the brachas that were part of the Kohen Gadol's Kriyas HaTorah become part of our tefillah. Tan Rabbanan, we'll say first wide line, Tan Rabbanan, Ushara tefillah, Rina, Tchina, Bakasha, Milfanach, Al Amcha Yisrael, Shetzichin Libashea. So we'll say again, the rest of the two, if you take a look at Rashi, Tan Rabbanan, Shara tefillah, Hashnei b'Mishnah Kachi, Rina, Tchina, Bakasha, Milfanach, Al Amcha Yisrael, Shetzichin Libashea. So ultimately, again, the Kohen Gadol had a beautiful formulated tefillah, Alam Yisrael, Dam for Klal Yisrael, Shetzichin Libashea, who requires salvation. V'choseim b'shameat tefillah. And the way he would end off this bracha was with the suffix of shomeat tefillah. V'achar kach, listen to this. V'achar kach, kol echad ve'echad mevi sefer Torah mi beiso. every person would bring his Sefer Torah from home. Rosie will say, now, it sounds like they're bringing it now. In fact, we'll say they weren't bringing it now. Remember again, they were bringing their Sefer Torah already from Erev Yom Tiv. Because remember again, Yom Kippur, like Shabbos, has an Isser Hotzah, right? Unlike other Yomim Tovim, where one is permitted to go ahead and carry, the Maaseh Yom Kippur is like Shabbos, is an Isser Hotzah. So what it means is, those who had Sefer Torah would bring their Sefer Torah already from before Yom Kippur, the Korebo, and they would then go ahead and read in their Sefer Torah, in order to show the beauty of their Sefer Torah to others. Look at Rashi. Laharos chazusa l'rabim, laharos noyav shal Sefer Torah, v'tiferes ba'ala, shetarach le'isnaus b'mitzvah shne'emar, zekili v'anveu, histan l'fanav b'mitzvos. Luv, so I want to say, so the idea over here is actually interesting. And if you think about it, it seems to be at first at least a little bit out of place in Yom Kippur. Right? So it's Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol is doing the avodah, they just finished the Kriya, and then what happens after they finish the Kriya? Everybody who had a Sefer Torah takes out his Sefer Torah. And what does he do with his Sefer Torah? He reads from his Sefer Torah to display the beauty of his Sefer to everyone. Rashi points out, because there's a concept of Zekeli va'anveu, this is my God and I will exalt him. Hisna'a, the fun of the mitzvahs. Beautify your mitzvahs. Make a beautiful sukkah. Purchase a beautiful lulav. And if you write a Sefer Torah, if you have the schus to write a Sefer Torah, write a beautiful Sefer Torah. That's the idea. Now, both say, now what does this have to do with Yom Kippur? Right? What does this have to do? Everybody's bringing their personal Sefer Torah. What does it have to do with Yom Kippur? So perhaps the pshat is a very simple one. Now, both say, Yom Kippur is the day of Slicho Mechila, forgiveness. What's the point of forgiveness? The point of forgiveness is a brand new beginning. Right? I want a clean slate. I want a brand new year. Well, what am I going to do with a brand new year? So we'll say, so what does everyone do on Yom Kippur? They bring their Sefer Torah. Almost to say, Ribono Shel Olam, I promise you that if you give me another year, I'm going to use it to learn and to live Torah. That's what I'm going to do. Because what does a Jew want to do with his year? We'll say, what am I asking for? Another year for hedonistic pursuits? Another year to have a good time? Another year to acquire wealth? Those are all nice things. You can do all those things. But what's the ikar of life? What is the ikar of life? The ikar of life, we'll say, is the ability to learn and ultimately to live Torah. Isn't that what the life of the Jew is all about? So on the holiest day of the year, when the Kohen Gadol finishes his Kriyas HaTorah, what does everyone do? They take out their Sifrei Torah and they read from it. To show ultimately, Ribono Shel Olam, if you give me another year of life, I'm going to learn and I'm going to live your Torah. Because Zo Hi HaChayim. That is the essence of life. The Gemara goes right there. Haruah Kohen Gadol. So it says, remember again, the Mishnah said an interesting statement. If you see the Kohen Gadol doing Kriyas HaTorah, you won't have the ability to see the Kohen Gadol burning the par, right? And if you see, so the Gemara says, not because you're not allowed to, just because they're in two different geographic locations. So pshita, that's obvious. So we'll say Reish Lakish says, in general, the halacha is you're not allowed to pass over mitzvah. So we'll say, so this is the general concept of mitzvah habali adecha al tach mitzena. If an opportunity to do a mitzvah comes your way, take it, don't pass over it. So the Gemara says, what does this mean? My mitzvah, what's the mitzvah? Berov am hadras melach. Sirabosai, you might have thought as follows. Let's say right now you are by the burning of the par, but you really want to be by the Kohen Gadol's Kriyas HaTorah. So you might have thought you're not allowed to leave the par to go see the Kriya. Why? Berov am hadras melach. Because where you are, you're helping to create the multitudes for the mitzvah. So perhaps wherever you are, that's where you have to stay. Kamash malon, ultimately again, that you are permitted to go ahead. So both sides. So the idea is there are two different geographic locations. So you have to choose in life where you want to be. Do you want to see the burning of the par? Do you want to go ahead and see the reading of the Kriyas HaTorah? And again, you might have thought that wherever you are, that's where you have to stay. You can't move. Now, why would you think that? Because maybe Ravam Hadras Melech, you are helping to create the multitude wherever you are. Kamash Malon, you could be wherever you choose to be. Just understand what? That Allah Lamaisa, you can only be in one location. So we'll say two incredible life lessons. Lesson number one is you can't dance at every chasana, as we spoke about a couple of days ago. Right? In life, you have to make a decision what you want to do, where you want to be, and you can't do everything and you can't be everything. And understand that whenever you choose A, you give up B. That's the way it works. You want to see the burning of the par? you're not going to see the Kriyas HaTorah. You want to see the Kriyas HaTorah, you're not going to go ahead and see the burning of the par. Because in life, whenever you choose what you want, understand that you are giving something else up. And therefore, choose wisely. Because whatever you choose, by definition, entails sacrifice. Rabbi Yossi also teaches us something else. Just because you made a decision now doesn't mean you can't reverse that decision later on. Meaning that if you chose to be by the burning of the par, and then what? And then you say to yourself, oh, I really want to see the Kriyas HaTorah of the Kohen Gadol. Do you have the right to leave and go to the Kriya? Absolutely. You may not make it in time, but Lamaisa, you have every right to go ahead and do that. Rabbi says sometimes in life we make decisions and we assume that those decisions are irreversible and unchangeable. And therefore we feel locked in to certain life decisions we have made. And we think there's no recourse, there's no ability to change, but it's not true. What is true is when you make a decision and you choose the para, you're giving up the kriya. You choose the kriya, you're giving up the par. Whenever you make a decision in life, whatever you choose, you're sacrificing something else. But when you make a decision, sometimes in life you realize, I didn't make the right decision. Or I made the decision that was right then, but it's not good for me now. It's never too late to engage in course correcting activity. You could always make the decision to change your life around. You might have thought that once you make the decision, Barovam Hadrus Melech, you're locked in. Kamash Balon, if you want to move from location A to location B, you have the ability to do that. The ability to change and the ability to move myself from one place to another is always an option I possess. Incredible. I will say right there in the Mishnah. We'll say now we're going to get, for the rest of the daf today, we're going to get a bit more into some of the technical issues regarding the sacrificials, regarding the karbanos. Here we go. Im bebigdei butz koreh, if the Kohen Gadol was doing the Kriyas HaTorah in the linen garments, right? So remember again, for the Kriya, he has the right to either wear big day kahuna or his own clothing. So for argument's sake, let's assume that he was continuing to wear the big day kahuna. And the big day butz koreh, kiddush yadav v'raglav, he would sanctify his hands and feet, meaning he would wash his hands and feet. Pashat yarad v'taval, he would go ahead and he disrobe, get undressed, go down to the mikvah. Olav and estafe, come up and get dried off. The Avila big day zav. And the Bible said, then they would bring him the golden clothing. So remember, he's finished the kriya, goes to the mikvah, comes up, dries off, puts on the gold clothing. The kidei shadav v'raglav, and then he would once again sanctify his hands and feet. The yatsa v'asas elabes elam. He now goes out to do the ayil, the ram offering. I will say there are two ayils. His ayil, right? His ram, and the communal ram. Ves shivas kvasim timimim b'nei shana de Rebbe Elazar. And I will say furthermore, now he would also offer up the 7 sheep, the 7 lambs. 7 lambs. These are Rabbi Elazar. So we'll say these are Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Akiva says no. In Talmud Shel Shachar, how you crave him. We'll say Rabbi Akiva argues, and he says that the 7 lambs were actually offered up earlier in the morning, together with the Talmud Shel Shachar, the morning Talmud. Upara ola, and he would offer up the par, the sar hanasa b'chutz, and the sar that was done outside. How you crave him Talmud Shel Bein Abayim. These were offered up. This is Rabbi Akiva Shita. According to Rabbi Akiva, the para ola and the sar that was done b'chutz, this ultimately again was offered up with the Talmud Shel Bein Harabayim. Good. Kiddush yadav v'raglav. He goes. So we'll say this is the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Ultimately, again, when were the 7 lambs offered up? So what happens? Now we go weiter. Says the Gemara. Good. Kiddush yadav v'raglav. He now sanctifies his hands and feet. Pashat undresses. Yarad v'tavel goes to the mikvah again. Olav in his stamp, he comes up, he dries off. Hevilo big day lavan. Now they bring him once again the white clothing. So we'll say the kiddush yadav v'raglav. He goes ahead. Remember again, I will say the process always is the way we paskin is that halacha lamaisa. When you disrobe, you go to the mikvah. Come up, get right, dry off, get dressed, sanctify hands and feet. Remember again, we actually paskin their sanctification 2 times, right? Before you undress, there's kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, undress, mikvah, dress, kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. He's now wearing the white clothing. The kiddush yadav v'raglav, nichnas l'otzias hakafas amachtas. So it's very interesting. Now he goes back into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Why does he go back into the Kodesh HaKadoshim? Because what did he leave there? He left there the ladle and the fire pan. Remember again, both say the way the Ketoras service works, we know is that he pours the Ketoras, right? Remember again, he does the whole process where he empties the contents of the ladle into his hand, right, without spilling anything. He then places the Ketoras onto the coals on the fire pan, and the Kodesh HaKadoshim then fills with smoke. He leaves. He lets that process unfold by itself. Now Rabbi Osai is coming back to remove the ladle and the fire pan. He once again goes ahead and washes his hands and feet. Once again, Rabbi Osai, same process, goes to the mikvah, comes out, dries off. Now he puts on his gold clothing. Kiddush yadav v'raglav, he sanctifies his hands and feet. V'nichnas lahaktir kitor shabein harbayim u'leheitiv es haneros. And I will say, now he goes ahead, and where's the big days of? For what purpose? To offer up the afternoon kitoras and to kindle the menorah. And I will say, the lashon of leheitiv es haneros literally means to arrange the menorah. Remember, arrangement of the menorah was already done when? In the morning. Now in the afternoon, he's actually coming in to kindle the menorah. The kidei shadav raglov. So say now after he kindles the menorah, once again washes his hands and feet. Pashat yarad v'tava alav v'nestapeg hevialo big day atzmo. We'll say, remember again, the last thing done for the day is what? Is the menorah. Right? The menorah is the concluding service. At this point in time, the Kohen Gadol has finished the avoda of the day. By the way, I'll point out, we mentioned this before, the easy way to remember when he wears white and when he wears gold is how? White is worn for the things that are uniquely Yom Kippur related. Gold is worn for the things that are part of everyday service. That's why the last begadim he wears are the gold begadim. He's offering up the afternoon kitoras and kindling the menorah, both parts of daily service. After this is done, he goes to the mikveh again, comes out, and what does he put on? Hivilo beide atzmo. We'll say the avoda of the day is done. Now Yom Kippur is not over quite yet, right? Because remember again, when was the menorah kindled? Bein ha'arbayim, before nightfall, right? Evening, before nightfall. So, but nevertheless, again, the Kohen Gadol is done. The avoda is done. He gets dressed in his own clothing. Listen to how beautiful this is. Umelavin oso ad beso. They would escort him back to his house. The Yom Tov haya osa lo havav. The Kohen Gadol would make a Yom Tiv. He would make a celebratory feast. Lo havav. We'll say, who are the ohavav? Right? So it's an interesting word because there are different gersos. In fact, again, if you look in Musaf of Yom Kippur, different machzorim have a different gersos. Some say lekrovav, for his family. Others say la'ohavav. So I've often felt ohavav is such. Who's the oev of the Kohen Gadol? Who's the oev? Everyone, right? Who doesn't love the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, right? You got to be you need a real refuah shalema if you don't like the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, right? If for some reason, we'll talk about this a little bit more. But the idea is he made a Yom Tiv b'shash yatsa mishalmin hakodesh. We'll say why did he make a celebration? Because he emerged from the Kodesh HaKadoshim whole, right? Or when I say whole, I mean alive, right? Alive. He walked out. So ultimately, again, he made a beautiful Yom Tiv. So we'll discuss that. So we'll say let's go back because the point of contention over here in the Mishnah is when the 7 sheep were offered up. Right? Ultimately, again, so Rabbi Eliezer has them being offered up almost as part, we'll call it in the afternoon. Rabbi Akiva has them being offered up already with the Talmud Shel Shachar. So let's analyze a bit. So the Gemara says, Heichi Ka'amar. So what are we saying? In Talmud Shel Shachar, hayu kravin upara ola v'sar nasa b'chot in Talmud Shabein Arbayim. Are we seeing that the 7 sheep were offered up together? Ultimately, I went to Talmud Shel Shachar, but the para ola and the sar b'chutz was done with the Talmud Shel Bein Arbayim. Odil mahakikar. Maybe this is what it means to say. Im Talmud Shel Shachar hayu kravin. Maybe the 7 sheep were offered up with the Talmud Shel Shachar. Upar ha'ola bahadayu. The par was offered up by itself. The sar hanasa b'chutz im Talmud Shel Bein Arbayim. And the sa'ir that was done b'chutz, ultimately that was offered up with the Talmud Shel Bein Arbayim. Furthermore, Vesu, Para Ola Rabbi Eliezer, the Shari Amos Abadei. But it's interesting, Rabbi Eliezer doesn't even mention the Para Ola. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, when was the Para Ola being offered up? Vesu, Bein Rabbi Eliezer, Bein Rabbi Akiva, Emure Chatos Amos Avidlu. Furthermore, according to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, when were the limbs of the chatas offered up? Amar Rava. So Rava says, Lo mishkachos lo maskanta, ela ol Rabbi Eliezer detana debei Rabbi Shmuel, ol Rabbi Akiva kida tosefta. So we'll say comes along Rava, and Rava says the truth is there are two authoritative versions. Either there's the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer, which was espoused by the Tana Debei Shmuel, or the Shita of Rabbi Akiva that we find in the Tosefta. So let's take a look at both of these versions. The Tana Debei Shmuel, because in Tana Debei Shmuel they said as follows: Rabbi Eliezer Omer, first of the widest lines are both. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Yatsa va'asa elo ve'ela'am. The Kohen Gadol goes out and does his ram and the ram of the people. Ve'imure chatos, and he also offers up the chatos limbs. Ava par ha'ola, but the ola par, the shivas kvasim, and the 7 lambs, the sarna sabachutz im tamid shabin abayim. All of these things, according to Rabbi Eliezer, are done with the afternoon tamid. So we'll say that's the position of Rabbi Eliezer, with a specific focus on the 7 lambs that are done together in conjunction with the Tamid Shabbein Ha'arbayim. Rabbi Akiva de Tosefta Mahi. What's Rabbi Akiva de Tosefta? The sign Rabbi Akiva Omer, Par Ha'ola, V'shivas Kvasim, Im Tamid Shal Shachar Hayu Kravin. So Rabbi Akiva argues fundamentally, and he says, no, the 7 lambs were offered up together with the Tamid Shal Shachar. They were done in the morning. Shnei Amar, Milvad Olas HaBoker, Asher Li Olas HaTamid. The achar kach avodas hayom. Afterwards was the rest of the avodah of the day, Amud days. Oops, sorry. The achar kach sar nasa b'chutz, and then afterwards is the sar that was done outside. Shneimar seir izim echad chatos milvad chatos hakiporim. The achar kach elo. Afterwards was the ayal of the Kohen Gadol, the ayal am, and the ayal of the people. V'achar kach emurei chatos, and then afterwards were the emurim of the chatos. V'achar kach tamid shel bein arbaim, and then only afterwards we'll see in Rabbi Akiva's model, the tamid shel bein arbaim is the last thing that's done. It's the last sacrificial item that's done. So both say, by the way, I'll just point out, we'll see the Rambam is going to paskin like Rabbi Akiva. So the order that we just read is actually the way it was done in the Beis Hamikdash. So take a look at that for one moment. According to Rabbi Akiva, what do you have? Par ha'ola, right? The ola par, and the 7 kvasim, the 7 lambs, they were done with the Tamid Shel Shachar. They were done with the Tamid Shel Shachar. Then there's the rest of the avoda of the day, as we have seen, right? Afterwards is the seir, right? The seir bachutz. Then ultimately again, then the ayil of the Kohen Gadol, the ayil of the people, the burning of the limbs of the chatos, and then again the concluding sacrificial piece is the Tamid Shabbein Arbaim. That's the order of the according to Rabbi Akiva. So the Gemara says, my time with Rabbi Eliezer. So we're jumping back and forth a little bit. So what's Rabbi Eliezer's sheet? I will say, why does Rabbi Eliezer say that halacha l'maisa, the carbon musaf, was brought together with the Tamid Shel Bein Arbaim? So the Gemara says, Avid Kidichsiv. Rabbi Eliezer feels that is the most straightforward reading of the Pesukim. Avid Bereishah Toras Kahanim. First do that which is spelled out in Vayikra. V'hadr the Chumash HaPikudim. And then you do the sacrificial service that's spelled out in Chumash Bamidbar. But Rabbi Akiva, where does he get his order from? Kidiktani Taima, as we saw before, Milvad Olas HaBoker Asher Li Olas HaTamid. Alma Musafin in Tamid Shal Shachar Avid Lahu. So interestingly enough, Rabbi Akiva says the juxtaposition of the Pesukim, Milvad Olas HaBoker Asher Li Olas HaTamid, teaches me that the Musaf, Rabbi say the Musaf over here are the 7 lambs. That the 7 lambs are offered up together with the Tamid Shel Shachar. Rabbi Eliezer, Hai milvad chatasa kiporim my avele. What does Rabbi Eliezer do with this pasuk? Homi baile amashe zemechaper. To teach us, Rabbi say that the karbanos are mechaper for the same things. Now, if you look at Rashi over here, Rashi right across. Ama shezemechaper mastis in the berakam in the shvuas darish lehachi va'ashiyish ba'yediyah. So we're not going to get into this now, but the point over here is there are different. These karbanos, many of these karbanos are mechaper for tumah, inadvertent tumah in the mikdash. There are different forms of inadvertent tumah in the mikdash. There's what's called yesh ba'yediyah betchila ve'ein ba'yediyah b'sof, ein ba'yediyah betchila ve'yesh ba'yediyah b'sof. In other words, tumah that occurs where I have moments of cognition, moments where I know what I have done, but then have a lapse of awareness. Rabbi Eliezer understands it to teach me that all of these karbanos are mechaper for all the same types of tumah. Rabbi Huda Omer Mishmo. Rabbi Huda says, Echad karav im talmud shal shachar, v'shisha im talmud shal bein ha'bayim. So we'll say now a new shita. Rabbi Huda says, name of Rabbi Eliezer, that's what? The way the 6 lambs are actually broken up is as follows. I'm sorry, the 7 lambs, I should say. You have 1 offered up with the talmud shal shachar, and 6 offered up with the talmud shal bein ha'bayim. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omer Mishmo. No, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says in his name, Shisha krevet im talmud shal shachar, ve'echad im talmud shal bein ha'bayim. 6 are offered up with the talmud shal shachar, 1 offered up with the talmud shal bein ha'bayim. My time of the Rabbanon. What's the logic of the Rabbanon? Trei kroi ksivi. It says 2 psukim. Ksiv milvad Allah saboker. It says ultimately milvad Allah saboker in addition to the ola of the morning. We'll say the Allah saboker refers to talmud shal bein shal shachar. In addition to talmud shal shachar, ksiv the yatsa va'asa es olaso. It says he will go out and do his ola. Hilchach avid minaya hacha u'minachar. So the Rabbanon will say the pasuk seems to indicate that some of the kvasim are offered up in the morning and some of them are offered up in the afternoon. Therefore, again, 1 is going to be done in the morning, 6 in the afternoon. So the Gemara says, "B'may kamif." What are they arguing about? Rabbi Huda savar avid chad kedichsev milvad Allah saboker. Rabbi Huda will say like this: perform 1 of the seirim in the morning with the talmud shal shachar, v'hadar avid avodas hayom, and then go ahead and do the rest of the avodah of the day, meaning the avodah of Yom Kippur. Dilma chalish kohen gadol, because we're concerned that maybe the kohen gadol will get weakened and fail to perform the avodah of the day, which of course would be problematic. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon savar no. Kevan da aschil avad shisha. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon say once you already started, perform 6. Dilma pasha, because perhaps he will be negligent in finishing off the rest. Because we're not concerned that the Kohen Gadol is going to become negligent with the avodah of Yom Kippur. Why? Because for the avodah of Yom Kippur, he is Zoris. The Chuli Alma, Mias Chad Ayilhu. So we'll say, interestingly enough, everyone agrees, according to this, that there is only 1 communal ayil that's offered up, 1 communal ram. Kiman Kerebi. The sign Rebbe Omer, Ayil Echad HaOmer Kan, Hua Omer B'chum Meshabikudim. But we'll say, Rebbe says, even though the ayil is mentioned twice, once in Vayikra, once in Bamidbar, it's the same ayil. There's only 1 communal ayil. Rabbi Shimon Omer Shnei Elim Hein. Rabbi Shimon says, no, there are actually 2 communal rams that are offered up. One mentioned in Vayikra, one mentioned in Bamidbar. There are 2 different ayils. My time with the Rebbe, what's Rebbe's logic? Echad. Rebbe says Echad, ayil Echad. So which indicates to us, ayil Echad, Rabbi say, teaches me what? 1 ayil. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, my Echad, what does he mean when he says Echad? Miyuchad sheba edro. Echad doesn't mean 1. Echad means what? The best. The best. That when bringing an ayil, you must bring the best from the flock. Rebbe nafkele mimivchar nidarecha. Rebbe learns that out ultimately again from mivchar nidarecha. The pasuk says explicitly the best of your nidarecha. Rebbe Elazar, Rebbe Shimon chad b'chova v'chad b'nedava. Rebbe Shimon will say no. One is to teach you that you must bring the best when it's an obligatory offering, and ultimately you must bring the best when it is a voluntary offering, utsrichi. And I both say you need to teach me this halacha both by obligatory offerings as well as by voluntary offerings, utsrichi. Look at Rashi, utsrichi. Sheyesh das note lomar nedava muvchares kidei shitiyeh mikubelas baratzon. Deyesh das note lomar chovati muvchares kidei sheyeh tzachas. Because again, had I not written it by both, I could have made the argument that maybe you only have to bring the best by a neder, or maybe you only have to bring the best ultimately by a chova. Therefore, the Torah writes it in both places to teach you that whenever you're bringing the carbon, it must always come from the best. So, just once again to close out this sugya, we paskin like the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Akiva, and therefore again the order is as espoused on the bottom of Amud Aleph. Namely, ultimately you start obviously with Talmud Shal Shachar, right? The Par Ha'ola Shiva Kvasim, so the Ola Par, the 7 lambs are brought together with the Talmud Shal Shachar. That's the way it works. Then Rabbi Akiva says, you do Avodas Hayom, the rest of the Avodah of Yom Kippur, and the rest of the Avodah of the day. And then again, there's the Seir Hanase Bachutz, the Seir that's done on the outside. 1 Seir, that's why Paskin only 1 Seir. Right? And ultimately, again, after that, the Ayil of the Kohen Gadol, the ayil of the Am, the burning of the sacrificial parts of the chatos, and then you close out the day with the tamid shalbein ha'arbayim. That's the sacrificial according to Rabbi Akiva, sacrificial order adopted according to the Rambam. We'll say we're going to stop over here. Coming attractions, incredible daf tomorrow. Absolutely incredible daf tomorrow. We're going to get into the rest of the avoda. We will also get into the Kohen Gadol. Also, we're going to see that last piece where the Kohen Gadol changes into his personal clothing and is escorted home. And the Yom Tov Haya Osa, incredible stuff ahead of us. We'll say Shekayach. Have a wonderful day.